Karpenter on AKS. Yes, it is a thing. It's still pretty new, but it is a thing nonetheless. So what I want to show is I want to show how to get an AKS cluster properly up and running, because it's not just a standard AKS cluster with Karpenter. And then I want to show how to incorporate Stormforge on that AKS cluster. So there are a couple of different things that we need to do. Now, the two things you want to definitely ensure that you have: Cilium, it's a requirement, and overlay mode. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the Git repo here, and I'm going to even show you, I did comment on it to see when we would have the ability to update existing clusters, because that actually wasn't a thing when Karpenter first came out. And I got to see if I can find the documentation, but there was a whole configuration for Karpenter to get installed and embedded on AKS, but it only worked with new clusters, not existing clusters. And that's cool to play around with, but that of course doesn't work in production, right? So now it looks like they're working towards it, but let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on here and what the progress is. All right, so this is the Git repo here for Karpenter. And if we just take a look, as we can see, I asked this question in December. Is there an ETA of when there will be some testing configurations for running Karpenter on an existing cluster? And as you can see here, we have validated that enabling NAP on the existing clusters work. So as long as they satisfy certain constraints, Azure Overlay, Cilium, some more on this, the NAP page, on a compatible cluster should work. We'll be relaxing some of the constraints over time. And that was about 2 weeks ago. And then 3 days ago, I tested enabling NAP on existing cluster and it worked like a charm. I wrote a small article about it. Awesome. So let's go ahead and take a look at that here really quick. Right. So Phil goes over everything that's necessary for the cluster to work properly, which is awesome. And then if we go back to the Git repo here and we scroll down, we can see the installation method, right? The node auto provisioning preview runs Karpenter as a managed add-on similar to managed cluster autoscaler. So that's really, really cool. And for a couple of reasons, but what I really love is Karpenter is running as a managed add-on. All right, so let's go ahead and do that with the official docs here. So I'm just gonna open up a terminal and we're just gonna open up the documentation here. We're gonna follow the documentation as we're doing this. First, we'll ensure that we add the extension. All right, and then we'll go ahead and we'll update the extension. And then we'll also need to do the register the node auto provisioning preview feature flag. All right, and this is going to be the managed Karpenter piece of it. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, this is doing its thing, perfect. So now what we can do is we can actually run this AKS create command, or you could use some Terraform, right? So if I just go ahead and if I zoom in here a bit, if you're creating the cluster with Terraform, you just want to make sure that you specify this network profile here. If you do that, should be fairly good to go. Just to see how this works based on the documentation, we'll go ahead and we'll create our cluster just like this. Zoom in here a bit on that. All right, so I'm just going to change a couple of these things here, like the resource group and the actual name of the cluster. So we'll say Karpenter test, and then for the resource group, I'm going to put it in my DevRel as a service resource group. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to let this cluster do its thing, because of course it's going to take a little bit for the cluster to get created. But really quick, what I just want to show here, notice node provisioning mode auto, that's the managed Karpenter, network plugin Azure, network plugin mode overlay, the data plane Cilium. All right, so that is what is absolutely necessary. All right, and we can see that was installed, or rather created. We can also see the overlay and the Cilium piece here, which is exactly what we needed. So now let's head over to the browser really quick. And if I just go in here, we can see that the cluster is in fact on. So now we have Karpenter handling the worker node management, right? So scaling up, scaling down based on load. So the next thing that we can do is we can head over to Stormforge and we can add in our AKS cluster. So I believe it was Karpenter 1, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, Karpenter test. Karpenter test. We'll do that continue there. We're going to copy our Stormforge credentials. So Stormforge has permissions on our cluster. And then we're going to do the install. So let's head over to VS Code really quick. All right, and we can see that configuration right here. I'm going to go into my values. I'm going to paste the new values in. And then we will do the installation. Oops, sorry. Let's do AZ AKS get credentials, namespace, Karpenter test, devrel as a service for the resource group. All right, cool. kubectl, get nodes. Let's just confirm that. Yep. All right. One more time here. Alrighty, so if we run kubectl, get pods, namespace, Stormforge system, watch, we can now wait for this installation to be completed. Alright, and we are all good here. So if we head back over, we can do a verify install. Stormforge is going to do its thing to make sure that it is in fact running. Alrighty, so if we go to overview here, we can see that the metrics are being gathered. It's going to take about 1 hour, but we can see our cluster is in fact here. It's just again gathering all of those metrics. So that's how we can get Karpenter and AKS working together with Stormforge. And again, Karpenter handling the worker node optimization, Stormforge handling the resource optimization from a pod and application stack perspective.